Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining us at the Elections Group for a webinar called Best Practice Regarding Elections. My name's Noah Praetz. I'm president and co-founder of the Elections Group. For those of you that may be joining us for the first time, the Elections Group's an election administration consulting firm, partner with federal, state, local election officials, working to implement new programs, improve processes for voters and other stakeholders, provide guidance, resources, direct management support for jurisdictions. Our team is made up exclusively of former election officials, election experts from across the U.S., and we're pleased to have you today. Got three awesome panelists: Derek Bowens, the Director of Elections from Durham County, North Carolina Board of Elections; Liz Cassin, the Campaigns and Project Manager, Election Protection at IssueOne; and Justin Berardino, Deputy Director of Operations at the Orange County, California Registrar of Voters. Now, before we begin, the Q&A feature is open for attendees to ask questions. We'll have a dedicated Q&A section towards the end of the webinar, and if your question's not answered, please follow up with email at support@electionsgroup.com. Now I'm going to turn it over briefly to our panelists to say a couple words about themselves. So I'll turn to Derek first, then Liz, and then Justin. Derek, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Good morning. Thanks, Noah, first for having me on. Very excited to be here with this esteemed panel. I'm Derek Bowens, Elections Director in Durham County, North Carolina. I've been Elections Director there since 2017. Great to be here.
Thanks, Derek. Liz.
Great. Thank you, Noah, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liz Cassin, and I am a campaigns manager with IssueOne on our election protection team. I've been with IssueOne for almost 2 years now, and I run our Faces of Democracy campaign, which is a group of over 50 election officials and poll workers from across the country, really seeking to strengthen trust in our elections.
Thanks, Liz. Justin.
I'm Justin Berardino. I'm the Deputy Director on the operations side for the Orange County Registrar of Voters. And I've been in the department for over 22 years now. And I'm excited to be here and share on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, guys. So election security, election integrity, sort of broad words, mean different things to different people. Certainly been at the core of elections officials' work, certainly since I started in 2000. Back then, concerns with accuracy or integrity revolved largely around punch cards, if you remember, and voter rolls, and that precipitated HAVA and money and statewide voter registration lists. But then 2004, DREs came under fire. 2016, we started worrying about Russians, Iranians, Chinese. 2020, like public health and COVID, but significant voter confusion. And now we're looking at 2024, and you've got AI on top. So, we don't know the story of this election yet. In 2017, when the Russians stole data from us in Illinois, it kind of chased me out. I got this bright idea to write a white paper called 2020 Vision, Election Security in the Age of Committed Foreign Threats. And this was mostly cybersecurity. I was lucky enough to get to go to Capitol Hill. Derek, saw that you got the opportunity to do that as well. Take some of these learnings to the federal government around cybersecurity, but cybersecurity feels like the good old days. We're worried about cybersecurity and physical security and voter confusion. And we spent a lot of time communicating, getting back to basics, the nuts and bolts of elections. And so we've got a concerned electorate wondering why elections are trustworthy, sort of underpinning a lot of our angst about physical security. And so there's been an uptick in interest in integrity. The Bipartisan Policy Center, R Street, and IssueOne, you all collaborated on an explainer called United in Security: How Every State Protects Your Vote. And so Liz, can you talk a bit more about this resource, how it came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Noah. So several months ago, us at IssueOne, we met with our partners at the R Street Institute and the Bipartisan Policy Center to discuss the development of this resource. And we've all heard from election officials that they oftentimes hear comments like, I know how elections are run in my county or state, but I don't know how they're run in another county or state. And what we know and what we've tried to illustrate is that there are a number of practices and security measures that are shared across many jurisdictions and states. And so we wanted to highlight where there are similarities to show that, for example, what election officials are doing in Arizona is very similar to what election officials are doing in Georgia. And we hope that this resource provides clear and digestible information about why all Americans can have confidence in the safety and security of their elections. And so we compiled this information from trusted sources, including the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, the National Conference of State Legislators, original research from partner organizations, and more. And this resource really does detail the security and integrity protections that make American elections strong, resilient, and trustworthy. So we broke down the information into 3 broad categories, which you'll see on the screen here. The first is that states have transparent, accountable elections. The second is that states confirm the accuracy of voting equipment. And the third is that states ensure that only eligible votes are counted. And so we highlight a number of checks and balances, and we wanted to provide election officials, the media, and general public with information that can give everybody confidence in how our elections work. And just a couple of things to specifically note within the resource, Noah. We try to focus on information and data that can help address some of the concerns that we often hear from some more skeptical voters. And so a couple of things I'll just call out, is the number of states that seek to have partisan balance from poll workers, or the fact that every state allows members of the public or political party designees to be poll watchers and observe the tabulation and other election processes, or that voters must meet federal and state eligibility requirements in their jurisdiction in order to register to vote, and that every state has a process for testing and approving voting equipment. So again, we really hope that this takes a couple of high-level shared common security practices that are shared amongst many, if not all states, and really just makes it easy to understand and helps to address some of those concerns that folks might have about how elections are run in various jurisdictions across the country.
That seems so important, because I remember in my old days, and I bet Derek or Justin could tell you, like, all right, Derek, you've convinced me. You run a tight ship. It's all on the up and up, but I don't know what the hell Justin's doing over in Orange County. And that Justin's voter says, all right, Justin, you got me, but what the hell's Derek doing? And it's really hard to share the credibility we built locally with our colleagues around the state or across the country. So underpinning it and those principles of bipartisanship, transparency, professionalism really seem to help create like a through line across the country, even though things are so different. But of course, the challenges are different everywhere. I mean, Derek, I'm really interested in, in Justin, sort of what successful strategies or tactics on the communication side when it comes to addressing election security and integrity.
I'll go first. So I think when speaking to anybody in the public, taking the time to engage with them, treat them with respect, making them feel heard. We, like probably most election departments, we're not overstaffed. We don't have a lot of staff. However, it is important that we carve out time to speak to anybody. Now, if they cross the line, if they become disrespectful, then we modify that. But I have found that just taking the time with anybody, no matter what their concerns are or how adversarial they are, taking that time and listening to them and hearing them, and it pays off dividends in a huge way. Another thing that we do is any presentation we give, whether or not it's regarding election security or they're asking us to talk about it, we put a component in there about election security and what's happening. And I like that, I like this resource that you're providing, because you're right. We do get a lot of people who go, okay, well, I trust Orange County, but I don't know what's going on in other places. And I've heard, that people go, well, yeah, I can't really speak to that county or whatever. But that doesn't help you. That doesn't help any of us. So, we instruct our staff to tell them, hey, every place has professionals just like ourselves working there that are just as dedicated as we are. And I love this now because this gives us something to refer to also.
Justin, I think that's great. Underpinning it in professionalism. I mean, your association does amazing work. Your conferences are super packed. Derek, you guys get a shared professional treatment of associations. You're on a board of a national training program. But let me ask you, to the same question. What kind of specific tactics on the comm side have been successful for you?
And thanks, Noah. I certainly agree with everything Justin just said. I would add, so in North Carolina, we have a lot of formal board meetings, several that begin prior to the election related to the review of absentee by mail ballots. And one of the strategies that we found to be effective, at least in our board meetings, is we have a section of our agenda that we call Ask the Board. And this is in addition to a general public comment section. And so we actually prefer that people ask the hard questions in open sessions of our governing board so that we can deploy that amongst anyone that would be listening to the proceedings, and to also quell any myths or disinformation. So that's been a really good strategy for us, is taking questions or incorrect speculation about how we do business, and staying at the forefront of that by responding in an open forum. And a lot of those questions that we respond to apply to other counties in North Carolina, because we have uniform practices with respect to a lot of things. And so we hope that by doing that, we can quell concerns about what surrounding counties may be doing. Although North Carolina counties rock, I don't think they need much support from us. But I would agree with everything Justin said, and that would be a strategy that we would implement. Another is with regard to public records requests. We really try to have an internal target of responding within 48 hours of any request that we receive. North Carolina law requires that we respond to public records requests as promptly as possible. So there is no set parameter for how long it should take us to respond, but we really try to be responsive with that regard, because that also helps quell concern that maybe we're trying to conceal something or we're not being transparent. But as Justin said, I think this information that's been put together by BPC, IssueOne, and R Street is great to kind of tell a collective story about what we're trying to do to, be transparent and also be forthright with the public.
I think it's amazing. I mean, you guys are talking about small group meetings. You were talking really transactional, Justin, one-on-one. Folks are building like explainers, I know, and handouts for observers, recognizing that the observers that come in are the ones that care the most, right? And helping them understand can diffuse the tension that might come in. But Derek, like the idea of an open session board meeting, I used to watch C-SPAN, British Parliament. Like the way they peppered their prime ministers with questions, to me seemed crazy. I always thought that'd be amazing in America, but like you put yourself down in the well and listen to that. I think that's pretty awesome and gutsy. Hey, so Liz, like you did this aggregation of practices and realized some through lines. Have you seen anybody take this? I mean, what's been the response to it so far from election officials? You've got a whole cadre in your Faces of Democracy campaign. Is anybody actually using it as is, or are they taking the learnings from it and applying it to themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question, Noah. And we've heard, and I know that our partners at BPC and R Street have heard that this is going to be a really valuable resource. And it has been already. And hopefully as we get closer to the election, folks in the public, election officials, the media, will continue to be able to use this and go back to this as a starting point, and a way to, again, get some information about how states across the country are really acting and making sure that their elections are safe and secure. And I know that I plan on hitting the summer conference circuit in the next couple of weeks, and I will be bringing many copies of these resources, and making sure that election officials and other partners and stakeholders in the space have access to it. Because again, we really want it to be a way to help build confidence and give people accurate information about why they can trust our elections, no matter what state you're from, no matter what county you're in. So we've heard some really positive feedback thus far, and we hope that we continue to hear that and it continues to be referenced and used in the months ahead.
That's super important, I think, because like as a former election official and my two colleagues that do it, they get this sort of one-on-one retail, direct to their voters, observers, skeptical folks. What doesn't leave a whole lot of time for interfacing in Washington or like across the country. And so for organizations like yours and your partners on this product, I think it's a great value add to the overall community. So we heard a lot in the last 10 minutes about your communications efforts, getting at some of the root cause of our angst or physical security concerns, which is driven by voter confusion. So you're doing a lot of work to communicate and build trust and confidence, but you're also taking serious steps to think about your physical security, not only of equipment and ballots, but your facilities and most importantly, your people, right? Now, Derek, I'll probably go to you first here, but almost 10 years ago, I remember putting on surgical gloves, okay, when opening mail ballots. Now, in that case, I was working with the United States Postal Inspective Service, trying to ferret out some bad campaign actors, right? And I wore the gloves because I didn't want my fingerprints on evidence. But as I understand it, around the country, folks are donning gloves and masks because they're worried about whether they'll be exposed to deadly substances. So it's a different world than one I operated in, very complicated. And so you're hyper aware of physical security of your buildings, of your processes, your procedures, intimidation tactics, external threats. So I'm interested in what you've done locally, Derek, as a first question, but then sort of broadly thinking about law enforcement agencies locally and at the federal level and how that collaboration can be improved.
Yeah, great question. So, obviously we're in a new environment with what happened related to the letters that went around to several elections jurisdictions with harmful substances included. I think as soon as, we found out about this, our State Board of Elections executive director immediately sent out information to counties regarding those incidents. And then soon thereafter, of course, we got information from the EAC, DHS, and even the Postal Service about best practices when dealing with mail in light of this new threat environment that no one, I think, expected, at least in our work, to experience. So one of the things we immediately did, and it goes to what you just said, Noah, for different reasons, is if we're opening mail, it's in an enclosed area, contained area with gloves and masks, and also aprons, actually, to prevent dispersion of any harmful chemicals. In our new facility, which we plan to move into at the end of each month, we actually had a consultant come in, a security consultant come in. So this, although it was unfortunate that it happened to the jurisdictions that it happened to, it was very beneficial to us because we could incorporate that into security plans and actually bring someone in preparation for this new facility. And so we actually had this company come in and they developed a full mail processing, a new mail processing system that will likely include mail detection devices, a separate exhaust system for that particular room that mail will be processed in, and also things like a monitor area for someone to watch the person opening mail. And also, I can't think of the chemical right now, or not the chemical, but the drug that's Narcan. Of course, also having that available to respond to any incidents that might occur in standard operating procedures to ensure we have a uniform execution of how we respond to any incident such as that. So I think our federal and state partners have done a good job to the extent they can, given how quickly this has come on, how quickly they're expected to respond with best practices for jurisdictions. I think they've done a good job, and it's brought a lot of comfort to election officials who are opening the mail, and certainly in particular jurisdictions where it may be more likely that this type of thing occurs. So we were, of course, not happy with the fact that jurisdictions had to deal with this, but it also was a benefit to us because we could plan and implement a procedure to deal with that as we transition into our new facility.
You know, I really want to pull on the sort of string. The organizations, EAC, Postal Service, CISA, right, put out suspicious mail handling guidance pretty quickly. And you're on the board of the Election Center, distributed that to all of its members. Like IssueOne, Faces of Democracy, there are all these sort of apparatuses that are great distribution channels. You were able to turn that threat environment, those recommendations on a dime, and make sure your new facility was equipped. So that's just fantastic maturity in the ecosystem of information sharing. I mean, it's pretty sad to think that, you know, we've got to make these investments in security, but I'm very heartened that you all stay in this business and recognize the democracy show must go on. Justin, you all made some investments too, right? Working with your sheriff's department. Can you talk about that partnership?
Yeah, so we sat down with the sheriff and we said, you know, look, these are the problems we're having. How can you help us? And I think taking that approach is helpful because it makes them feel like they're part of the solution. I have found when we approach them and we say, hey, we need you to do this or we need you to do that, you get a different response. But when we sit down and say, hey, you're the experts, you know, butter them up a little bit and say, this is the problem we're facing, they have tended to open up quite a bit. So one thing that one issue I presented to them is, you know, when we have incidents, for example, we had someone recently that was by a drop box and he's yelling at people that are coming to vote and scaring them off. And they're actually, you know, the people aren't voting. They're walking away because of this fellow. In the past, we've had situations where the local police are like, well, that's, you know, it's public property, it's First Amendment, it's not trespassing. It's like, no, you don't understand. There's voting. This is against the law. But they don't believe me. They don't believe anybody from the registrar's office. And our sheriff's department knew that. So they said, look, what we can do is we're going to assign you somebody and they'll be like a liaison to other law enforcement officials. And that way there's somebody that they trust that they're hearing from it. So in our case, they're stationed in our command center where people call in with issues. I know that may not be available to every county, but if you just have a point of contact and you really train up, you know, just a couple people from the sheriff's department, then they can help when, you know, local law enforcement calls and has those issues. We did it for the first time in the primary election. Unfortunately, we had to utilize that probably every day of our 11-day voting period because there was an issue almost every day. But the change in response from law enforcement in the field was night and day. Additionally, they were able to kind of provide us updates, you know, because they have access to all the information on what's happening. They provide us updates in real time of, you know, what's happening at the vote center and so forth. So, you know, and they also will deal with issues at our central facility too. So that partnership really paid off a lot in the primary, and I'm expecting November it'll be the same.
That's great. I sit on the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections with Derek, and actually your sheriff is a member as well, newly. And the whole point of the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections is to help to facilitate that relationship building between election officials and law enforcement. And like you said, that first step is helping them understand what it is you're facing and going through level setting. They share with you like under what circumstances they can come in. And from there, you sort of build a strong relationship. I applaud what you guys have done with the sheriff's office for many years. Like those little pocket guides that you guys build. Well, the Safe Elections, Committee for Safe and Secure Elections now built it for all 50 states. and it's very valuable in helping build that relationship. So Liz, like you heard from these folks about some of their local relationships, local practices. I shared the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, but you've also sort of got a national view and plug in. What's your sense of how, what role law enforcement can play in creating a safe environment or supporting one?
Absolutely. And, for the past couple of years at IssueOne, we've been able to host a couple of fly-ins here to Washington, D.C., where election officials and members of the Faces of Democracy campaign have had the opportunity to meet with federal lawmakers, members of the administration, and the Department of Justice. And I think those types of opportunities and conversations for election officials to talk about, what they are doing in their jurisdiction, some of the, safety and security concerns they have, and how federal partners might be able to support, as well as with some of the more local and county law enforcement. I think those conversations are incredibly important. And we've heard from the Department of Justice about all of the different resources and contacts at the state and local level, to make sure that election officials have information about their, the contact for their local FBI elections crime coordinator, or folks at the Department of Justice election crimes branch. So just making sure that even at the federal level, those law enforcement connections are made. And then also, hearing from election officials when they're talking with members of Congress about, what types of safety and security improvements they would make with additional resources in their election offices. I think being able to highlight those needs at the federal level are really important and complement a lot of the great work that's being done at the local and county level. And also just want to applaud the pocket booklets and all of the tabletop exercises that the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections has been able to work on. I think those are just incredible resources and so valuable for so many election officials across the country.
Thanks. Thanks, Liz. And that's super helpful to be able to push up while while the election officials here are like securing their neck of the woods. After 2017, I wrote the Election Security and Agent Committed to Foreign Threats. Well, in 2020, published Election Security in a Time of Disturbance, right? We've updated that a little bit. And we've got a new guide on our website called Standing Up to Intimidation, Preventing Overt Attacks. And in here, we're trying to help election officials prepare to security concerns, helps reassure voters and workers that while deterring and de-escalating threats, that there's an effort there to ensure that no attacks would succeed, that voting goes on. A little pivot here, but I'm interested in ways in which technology might be leveraged to enhance physical security at voting locations, recognizing that we don't want to live in a police state, that we want a camera overhead only where it's absolutely necessary. We don't want to be walking around needing the reassurance of blue lights, and packing law enforcement that we want to rely on so how do we get that balance, and maintaining that balance, what tech can be helpful? I mean, Justin or Derek, do you guys have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. I think for us, Noah, one of the things that we do, and I want to add, I agree, certainly with Justin and Liz, in coordination with local law enforcement and also emergency management, which has been a great relationship that we've leveraged here in our county. But one of the things we do at certain voting locations, given whether we feel a heightened security posture may be needed at those sites, is we provide for unarmed security at facilities to, of course, deal with the concern that having law enforcement on site could cause, or nearby, could cause intimidation while also addressing concerns with regard to, overactive electioneers or incidents that may occur at the polling place, and of course, in compliance with North Carolina law, as noted with the pocket guides, which are again very excellent in keeping law enforcement and even emergency management officials in full step with legal requirements as to how a response could occur if needed. So that's one thing certainly that we do. Another thing is just a great relationship, again, with emergency management. We've built a system that allows us to communicate with them through electronic means, and also by having an individual from our office be within our emergency operations center, whether that's activated on a limited or a full capacity. So it really gives us a direct tie-in if an incident occurs, which would allow for a very quick response. Our folks also have one dedicated line that they call for incidents. Of course, if it's a 911 issue, they call 911. If they need to execute their on-site emergency plan, they do that. But having that connection with emergency management certainly gives us a lot of relief in terms of being able to respond to an incident and also being proactive through intelligence, things that they're hearing that we can kind of step into and deal with prior to election events. I think that's very important to meet with law enforcement and also emergency management to kind of be ahead of the game to the extent we can. And I know Justin mentioned that. Another point I'll make, and this is something that we're planning to implement for November, so it's coming, but I think it'll really help us have a closer beat as to what's going on at voting sites. Is we're hoping that voters will use our real-time voter satisfaction survey that we're implementing beginning with the early voting period here in Durham, where we have a staff person that is actually monitoring that through a Power BI dashboard of feedback on experience. And so if we see things that are red flags, whether that be, restrictions to the ballot box or issues with electioneers, we can immediately route that information to emergency management through our EOC if needed, or we can speak to our unarmed security or our chief judges or site coordinators to look into that issue and let us know if there's any a validation to what's being reported and then respond appropriately.
I think that's a really cool instant feedback loop and positioning like your voters at the center of it to make sure it's driven by sort of their experience, them being the first ones. I think that's awesome. I'm struck by the fact that the voting environment, right, is very different than headquarters and operations. Back when I started years and years ago, Grandpa Praetz here, we had election day, right? No early voting. Mail voting was small, and we sent the ballots to the precinct. So, as soon as 7 o'clock came, results were up, and there was a week to canvass. Obviously, there were gaps there that didn't serve all the voters, so we, expanded to early and mail, and it's the same story around the country. But it pushes a lot of work in the days after the elections to headquarters, and that images from 2020 where Sheriff Penzone and Maricopa had to put up barbed wire around the place, or in Clark County where there were like snipers on the roof to protect. You saw banging on windows, in Detroit, even though the whole place was full of the partisan observers, for every table. And so I think there's some recognition that you might do a little more show of force around headquarters, but you can't impact the observation because elections are no good if they're not observed by the partisans with a stake in it, as long as they're playing by the rules. And so, Justin, I'm interested in how you guys interact with the observers who you need to be there to validate your work, right? Especially a losing candidate, nothing more powerful than them saying, yep, I watched it. It was fair. I lost. I'm going to get them next time. That's the only play. That's where legitimacy comes from. So how do you protect that process, but also ensure that your entire staff is counting them ballots for 3 more weeks like you do in California?
Yeah, so is the question, how do we balance the transparency with the safety, the physical safety? Is
I
that
think that's fair. In like you did it in 2 words, it took me like 2 minutes. Sorry. You got it.
Well, one of the things that we did recently is install a metal detector. And the thing is, any before doing this, I thought it sounded like that would be a big expensive thing, but it's really not. They're pretty cheap. You can rent them. You just plug it into the wall. Um, the thing with the metal detector, we do a bag check now. And the thing with all that is I don't think those things provide too much security in and of themselves, but it gives the impression that we're serious about our operation and the security of our operation. Um, that combined with how we train our employees to interact with the people and always give this culture and this appearance like we're not, we're serious, we're not messing around here. Just that vibe, I think, has really changed and has really helped us to have that balance of allowing everybody to come in, but also when they're in there to behave. So it's really you have to approach it from the different levels. Just putting the physical security measures in place is a part of it, but really training the employees on how to interact, be professional. And we also have a team of what we call ambassadors, and they are people, their whole job, we use we use people who have been helping people vote throughout the election cycle, and they stay on after the election. Because I don't know if it's in other counties, but for us, we really get the heavy turnout of observers on and after election day. So they stay on and they just help them. They walk them around, they write down their questions, they give them attention and care, and that really keeps them occupied and satisfied.
And cared for, right? And that reminds me a bit, Derek. I don't know what exactly you said, but you're like, if it looks sloppy, it might be sloppy. I know your approach is like we are clean and orderly, and that is calming. Can you talk a little bit about sort of your approach to making sure folks watching you find you like competent and trustworthy professional?
Yeah, to me, and I say this to my team all the time, optics is 50% of the battle. You have to know what you're doing, but optics is a huge piece all the way down to, how the boardroom is set up. And, do we have stanchions up that creates a barrier between the public and the board? And as Justin said, it lets folks know that we're about business. And that this isn't a place where you're going to come and, misbehave, but also get the access and transparency that you're looking for. So we put a lot of emphasis and a lot of time in, one, how things look, because we want what we're doing on the back end to align with what people are seeing. So optics is critically important. I think we have quelled and eliminated a lot of angst about election operations by doing just what Justin said, is making our observers feel very comfortable, welcomed, and enabled to ask questions at the appropriate time. We have, in Durham, we have 3 individuals that come to every single thing we do. And we call them the 3 Susans, and their names are literally Susan. And because we've, created an environment for them to come in, ask questions, inquire with the board, see processes that others might not, who attend, even though they would be able to see those things had they asked, may not be as privy to. They've been a huge support to us with regard to telling the community, hey, we know you're hearing this, but this is the way it's actually done. And I've got minutes from this meeting that can prove to you that this is the process, because this is what we saw. These are the questions that we've asked. So cultivating those relationships with those 3 has been excellent. And it helps when new people come to our board meetings and they're skeptical. We often see the 3 Susans turn around, regardless of what party they are, they'll turn around and say, Well, let me help explain that part to you because that may be a little bit more detailed for a newer individual. And so cultivating that relationship, making sure you have great optics and how things look, I think really, really go a long way.
I think it's important. Like Liz, briefly remind me, and I'll tell you what, your Faces of Democracy program, it's set on the idea that, these are neighbors and friends. Just tell us why that matters.
Absolutely, yes. So when the Faces of Democracy campaign was founded about 2 years ago, it started with an initial cohort, really with the goal and purpose to humanize election officials. They're the folks that you see in the grocery store, you see them in the pickup line. They are your friends and neighbors, and they go to work every day to ensure that every eligible voter has the opportunity to vote in a safe and secure environment. And that's a really big piece of what the campaign continues to do. Again, making sure that people in the community know who is running elections, that they can trust the people running elections, and they have no reason to fear that elections are not going to be run in a safe and secure manner. And that's a huge piece of how we try to communicate about the Faces of Democracy campaign and the work that we do. And one thing that IssueOne has really been focusing on and will continue to focus on as we head closer to the 2024 election is really driving people to trusted sources of information. We've seen that local and county election officials are some of the most trusted voices when it comes to information about how our elections operate. So we have been really trying to push people towards those folks like Derek and Justin, local election officials, to be able to really see what the process looks like and get truthful, accurate information from the secretaries of state websites or local election or websites. So that's been something that we have been really focused on, and I can make sure we drop our website that we helped build, howelectionswork.org, in the chat. It's a great resource that will take people to the state election director's website, the secretaries of state website, and really get them the truthful, accurate information that they need to understand how elections work in their state and in their counties, and again, really use that as a way to build trust in the process.
I love the frame of you're humanizing the election workers. And I heard it in Justin and Derek in particular in talking about observers, right? The observers that come in, the three Susans, are our friends and neighbors too. And we see them at the grocery store. And yes, they come in highly skeptical sometimes mad and frustrated, but by and large, if you could treat them with humanity, you can win them over. Derek won over the three Susans. But part of that is the communicating, right? These elections aren't easy. They aren't single-day affairs. They're, multi-pronged with a lot of edge cases. And so one of the things we built was a thing called a meaningful observation series. And I can tell you from being at Justin's shop and hearing from Derek and colleagues all around the country, that when observers, poll watchers understand what it is they're watching, the temperature comes way down. I was in a ballot counting facility for an election, and there are 5 processes going on, signature review, opening, stacking, scanning, bundling, storing. And observers are like, they can't wrap their heads around 5 things happen at once with people running around. A little while, next election, there were signs all over the room with a key describing these, people wearing lanyards. The tone was just different because you were communicating professionalism, care for the observers, wanting them to understand so they could be validators. It's just been amazing watching the elections field grow to take care of that customer base. So yeah, I mean, we built a meaningful observation series that helps election officials sort of download it, label it, whatever, if they like to. Also point out that we just recently published another physical safety document called Running Secure Elections with Confidence, ensuring physical safety for personnel. We got a link to that in the chat as well. And it covers collaborating with law enforcement. We've talked about this already, and safe elections already. There was one other one I want to draw our attention back to, is that sort of post-election period, right? And so we've got a document called Secure Headquarters Checklist, and that's the idea of like creating sort of a layered approach. You've got an inner sanctum, which you protect, really heavily, because your workers got to continue to work, and and then out from there, you've got sign-in places, and you got visuals on it, and the key is that democracy must go on no matter what's happening outside the building. How do you guys think about sort of layering that security in the post-election process? Justin, I mean, you got a huge warehouse, right, with a variety of different operating spaces. I appreciate you've got a couple glass rooms on the inside that allow people to work with some observation outside. I mean, what's been your approach?
Yeah, Derek mentioned a lot of it, stanchions, visual. We have signs all over the place. You mentioned them knowing what they're watching makes a big difference. So we have probably about 20 large signs at all the different stations that describe what they're watching. And we also do daily tours with people who come and observe. And again, this is post-election. We don't really have as much need pre-election, but they'll come in and, if it's light, we'll just give them a tour on the spot. But if there's a lot of requests, we will set a time each day. And we have people that will take them around to all the stations and say, hey, this is how you observe. You come here, you watch this. This is what they're doing. This is what you can and cannot do. If you have a question, this is who you speak to. And yeah, I mean, that approach, we've kind of been, every election, we update it and tweak it a little bit. But I mean, the difference that has made has been, it's been huge, huge difference.
And you guys are dealing with legacy space. I've talked to a few architects who are like, I'm getting bombarded by election officials to build new space, because they want specific space for workers when they're working, but they also want them to have safe space, a little chill out room so they can just like hang out and have lunch and not be watched, or, have to go to their car to get a few minutes away. Derek, you were able to build a new warehouse in this environment. Talk to me how you thought about, both the staff, making sure this was transparent to people, but also making sure your team had a place to be comfortable with themselves for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that we did when the commissioners, after 7 years of petitioning for this new consolidated facility, it was a long struggle. So when we tell the story about this new facility, it was not something that we just, hey, commissioners, we need this money for a new facility. We had to tell a very detailed story and justify it all, because often, elections offices don't get, aren't primary when it comes to priority projects that need large funding. But in our case, we actually took a flight, me and my board chair and deputy director, we took a flight to LA County. And we met with Dean Logan, and he actually was in the process of developing his new ballot processing center. So we got the opportunity to go to 3 different facilities and really see what I felt was and certainly what Justin has mentioned as well, being from a large jurisdiction, a gold standard with regard to transparency, giving individuals the opportunity to see what they want to see within the confines of the law, and sometimes going beyond, what is the limit in the law that would be still legally compliant, or at least the baseline in the law, while also protecting workers. And so one of the things that really we thought was incredibly interesting at that facility is what I like to call the transparency cube. So the ballot processing center, observers can literally walk around a cube and see every thing that's going on with regard to processing those ballots. So we took that idea, and we actually have something similar, except the facility isn't big enough to have a full walk around cube, where folks can see everything that is happening with ballot review, ballot counting, correspondence about, evaluating for next steps, of course, all within the confines of our law. Also, even access to the facility. When you come in, you got to you get a badge printed. We're already prepared for you. You put that on, and we hope to also eventually do tours of the facility, to the extent possible, considering security and also things that, we, from a security perspective, we don't necessarily want to reveal, i.e. duress buttons and things like that. That trip, and also speaking with other jurisdictions across the country, was really beneficial in developing that design. But also working with an architecture firm that actually worked with another board of elections in North Carolina that already had some familiarity. And then bringing in security consultants and working with emergency management and our sheriff on best practices around security, while also considering transparency for the public, because they have to have that. So I would say all of those things coupled together really helped us put together what we think is a world-class facility, and one that we hope to provide the public an opportunity to see, while protecting our staff from any level of interference.
The transparency cube, like it's a fishbowl. That's tough operating environment for y'all. Between those and like cameras, I can just imagine the you've been over to see it.
No, I lost you there for a minute. If that was for
Okay,
me, if you could.
I think I'm back. Am I
Okay.
back?
Yeah, I can hear you fine now. Mhm.
All right, good. Justin, you were on the spot. Your neighbors, your rivals, LA next door, the world-class facility. Hey, you heard it from Derek. He was about to make you foot stomp that, but I won't do that to you. That's not fair. Tell me about why yours is the best.
I can't compete with what LA is doing. I think Derek is right. They've been able to develop the gold standard, so we're going to be going out there too to try to get some ideas. But I think I think we all, like like you're saying earlier, depending on the jurisdiction, we may have different resources, but we all are dedicated to the same thing. So the same guiding principle that Derek mentioned is what, we're trying to achieve with, our limited space and resources. Again, I love how he's talking about the badges and just the visuals of, we mean business. We're serious. And it's funny because people assume otherwise. And then they're shocked when they see, how knowledgeable, professional, and how we do operate. So
yep. Yeah, I mean, you guys both are lucky. You've been not lucky, you've earned it, but you also got supported from your counties, right? You get the financial backing to make those sort of investments. So many of your colleagues around the country are sort of single person entities, mom and pop shops, who are having to like just absorb these best practices as best they can. But most of the spotlight media markets are directed towards you folks. So I applaud the efforts you make, around that frame, which is friends and neighbors, treat these folks with respect, like show them you're professional, got your act together. We'll get through this together. Liz, like what is your 2024 sort of message, your sort of best case? And then I'll turn it to Justin and Derek to close us out with their sort of their positive story for 2024.
Yeah, I feel so lucky every day, Noah, to be able to work with members of the Faces of Democracy campaign and hear from election officials like Justin and Derek about all of the incredible things that they're doing in their communities to strengthen trust in our elections and make sure that there is so much transparency, that people can really, seek out information to understand how elections operate in their city, county, and state. So I have so much faith in all of the folks that run elections across this country. And, we will continue to try and drive people, again, to the trusted sources of information, to make sure that people are getting truthful, accurate information from the source, and just continue to elevate and lift up all the incredible election officials, poll workers, election administrators across the country. So I am optimistic and have so much faith in the people that run our elections, and it'll be an exciting couple of months. But I'm just honored to be in the presence of these two current election officials, and again, work with all the Faces of Democracy members and really make sure that they have the support to be able to continue to run elections in a safe, secure, and transparent way.
Well, and thank you guys for the effort you do to help craft a national narrative and make those connections where the folks doing the work on the ground can't. It is helpful. Now, Justin.
So you asked for a positive note. Here's my positive note. These things that we're dealing with are very, very challenging, but I actually like the challenge. I think it's fun. Despite how difficult it is, it's kind of fun and exciting to deal with it and be a part of something that is really, I mean, this is historical, and there's not that many of us in the elections community. So it's a small group of people that really have a huge impact. So I like being faced with this challenge and trying to deal with it. And hopefully the positive note is hopefully everybody can pass on that passion to everybody else and really remind us that it's kind of a cool thing to be involved in.
Yeah. Derek.
Well, totally agree with all of that. I think I would leave as a positive note is one, you're really not in this alone. In our case, working with local law enforcement, I know, Noah, you've mentioned the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections and the great work they've done to kind of facilitate the relationship between law enforcement and election officials. There are people in your counties. People often ask me, how do you guys do all this stuff? How do you must have a lot of money. No. Most of this stuff is free because we've worked with emergency management. We've worked with departments within our county that have these resources on an enterprise level that we can just drop into, emergency notifications, things like that. So the positive note that I would leave is more from a process perspective is really, really talk to other departments, emergency management, law enforcement, about how you can leverage them to make your environment safe at polling places, but also the people you work with, because those are that's the most important stock that you have is your people. And you do have resources, you do have support, and you have other election officials that can help you figure out or craft a narrative if that's a difficult conversation or a difficult thing to approach. So I would just leave with, you have support, you've got resources, just got to plug into them, and you've got people that are more than willing to help get you there if needed.
And it's awesome. I feel like super enthusiastic about this election. There's a lot of concern, negativity. We're taking tremendous precautions out there, but Americans transfer power at the ballot box. They have, and they're going to do it again in 24. Americans back the ballot box. That only works because of the work you guys do. Okay. So we know that's what's happening in November. Prepping for it. You guys, you're amazing. I applaud your efforts. I applaud the time you took today to share with your colleagues. I thank you. And to your top line, you're not doing this alone. Federal government's got your back at CISA, the EAC, your state and local emergency management and police are there, and backup organizations like the Elections Group and IssueOne are doing our best to fill gaps and go get them. I appreciate you guys. Liz, Justin, Derek, thank you very, very much for your time today.